Hello Legacy Sabers, Marsh here. So today we're going to review strings for the AP exam. This is going to cover the basics of strings and then also the methods that may show up in an FRQ. So the first thing we want to remember are that strings are an object. When this is meaning is that there's a reference variable attached to them. So you're probably saying, well, Marsh, what does that in fact mean? Well, in memory, so this is the memory of my computer right over here, there is not only an information where the actual string is located, so like let's say the string is Bob, there is what's known as a pointer object or a pointer variable that is holding the address to where Bob is located in my memory. When you create a string object, you are not actually creating just one thing. You're creating two things. You're creating the actual information and then the address in which that is in memory. Unlike your other objects and variables that you make in Java, these are immutable. That means they cannot be changed. So let's say I change this variable, whatever it may be, to instead of Bob, I make it Jimmy. What's going to happen is I actually am going to just change the address. I'm not going to change this, Bob. I'm going to be changing the address to Jimmy, wherever I'm going to be making Jimmy over here. And I will be changing my pointer, the address, to Jimmy's new spot. Bob technically still exists in the memory of my computer until my program is, let us say, dead or done. That way it saves the information that is on there. Why is this important? Well, sometimes with strings, especially if you attach two strings to be the same, let's say, information, you could be technically pointing at the same spot in memory. This can cause a problem if you are looking at trying to get information or you're changing one of them. So just be aware of that. If two strings have the same information, that can cause a problem in memory for you. Further, the next thing that we want to talk about is concatenation. You guys have done this a bajillion times in this class already. Concatenation of strings just means you're putting two things together to form one string. Remember, the concatenation operator is your plus sign, the plus sign. So here's my string. I say hello, and then I got good buddy. And then string C, I take MM and I add an X. What I'm doing is I'm slapping together hello good buddy. Now be careful with that. Remember, if you want a space in between the two variables when you're concatenating, you do have to keep that in mind. Because right now what my string C would have is hello and then good buddy. Notice hello and good are slapped together, put together without a space. Be very, very careful with that when you are putting strings together with variables. Sometimes you do forget that you do need that space. Another thing we want to remember is these indices of a string. They are very, very similar to, let's say, an array. What a lot of people consider a string is an array of characters or char data types. So when we are making these indices, they start at 0 and then they move their way up. Now, as we are looking at this, remember, indices, the last index, is always one less than the length of the string. So a good thing to keep in your brain or your mind, if you ever want to find the last index of a string, it is this code right here. The name of the string variable you're looking at, Bob, Jim, whatever its name is, dot length, and then we're going to subtract 1 from that. That gives us the last index or the last letter or whatever character of the string that you are looking at. That does help you quite a bit, and it lets you identify in the back end of a string. Now you're probably saying, Marsh, I remember that there was a length method, I can't remember it. What that does is return the number of characters in the string. Okay? So if I have string the name equals Donald Duck, and I got int len equals the name dot length. Notice I'm calling the name of the string because strings are a class. So what I am doing is I'm accessing methods of the string class. So that's why I need to have a string object dot, and that gives me its superpowers, my option of get my superpowers up there, which would be like the length or the index of or any of those. So I need to be able to call on the object first before I can access its superpowers. So I am asking dot length. Now remember, dot length, the length doesn't start counting at 0. It starts counting at 1. It wants to literally know how many things are in my string. So if I count Donald Duck, I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't forget about spaces. 8, 9, 10, 11. So len would have a value of 11. Okay. Another ability of you guys that you guys should keep in mind is that there's an index of method. And I like to get this one very confused very commonly with char at. Index of returns the index of a string inside of another string. So what this is doing is it returns a number. It returns what number does a string show up. So again, I have the name is Donald Duck, and I call index of on the name, and I want to know where is on in the name. Okay, so on here, what it's going to do is it's going to determine where's the first appearance of on in this variable. So it's going to go on its index, and it's going to notice on starts at 1, index 1, correct? So index would have a value of 1 on this. Now, something to keep in mind, and something that's very, 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 very useful. What if the index does not exist? What if I did the name dot index of, and I look for, let's say, a Z? Okay? If that happens, what will be returned by index of is a -1. This is Java's way of saying, nope, not there. Okay? Keep that in mind. And very commonly, that's a very common thing that you write in code as your way of thinking, well, what if it's not there, or what if it is there? Because what you can do is you can say if the name.index of is not equal to -1, that would be my way of saying, you know what, that's in there somewhere. I don't care where it is, but it's somewhere. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're thinking about your index of, that you can use -1 for your advantage to either say it's not in there or if it is in there. Char at is a little bit different in this regard. It's going to return a character at the very specific index that you ask. So I want to know what char is at spot 4. This will return a letter or a character, whatever it is. So I'm going to spit out 4, so that'd be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Notice that's an L. So I would print out an L on this. Now, characters, chars, are kind of difficult to work with. They don't work well together, especially if you try to add a char and a char together. What's going to happen is it's not going to actually put them together, concatenate it. It's actually going to add the letters together, which is a really strange occurrence, but it will do it. And then you'll get something completely different in there. So keep that in mind when you are working with chars. I try to avoid them, but this char at method is quite useful. You could, if you would want, after you've used this, you could do a new string variable. So string let equals string, and I could go letter. Okay. What I'm doing is I am typecasting right here. And we've talked about typecasting in the last review here. Typecasting allows you to type. I'm basically saying you are a letter, you are a string now, Mr. Letter. And he goes, okay, I'm fine with that. Okay, that's what all typecasting does. It forces the hand of the variable to be a something that we're making it fit. We're making it fit the box, if you want to say it that way. Which can be quite useful if you want chars, but you don't want to be dealing with the problems of them. There's also 2 things about the substring method. Remember, there's 2 versions of substring. Each version just returns a piece of the substring that you asked about. Now, I have my pet is Sparky the dog, and I have a substring of 4, 12. Now, again, reminding you, we are going to start at index 4, but for 12, we are going to end before that one. Okay, so technically we're going to go up to 12 but not take 12. Those of you that are math driven, what this would look like is a bracket on 4 and a parenthesis on 12, okay? Or with your signs, we would be taking, it'd be all things greater than or equal to 4, but things less than 12, okay? So if I'm looking at this, I need to count where spot 4 is in my pet. Okay, so that starts at K. I'm going to take everything between 4 and 12, but not including spot 12. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So I'm going to take up to D. So what I'm going to take is KY, the D. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're working through this. A lot of students, what they'll get confused on if there is a substring problem, that they will think that this, they take up to this letter and keep it. Do not fall into that trap. Get it into your brain somehow that that last number is up to it but not including it, okay? There is another version of this that you get to take the piece until that and after that. So if I have substring with only one number, you are assuming that this is meaning start here and go to the end. So if I want spot 4, I'll start at KY, or K, excuse me, and I'll get KY the dog. Okay, that would be it. So if you don't have two numbers, if you only have one number, that means you want to start at that and go to the end. You could write the other one similar to that. I could also write it in two spots. I can go for my pet dot length. Okay, this would be equivalent. These would be two equivalent statements if I wanted to do that. However, I find some students do get confused with writing it this portion, and then they might lose a point because they might put a -1 or something there. That would cut off the last letter of that string, which could cause a significant problem. Probably would lose you 1 point in an FRQ because you didn't take all of the pieces of the string. And the final method that we're going to want to talk about tonight is the equals method. The equals method returns a Boolean value if both references point to the same object. Honestly, what it's doing is checking to see if the objects are the same thing. So if I say A dot equals B, it would say true, okay, because they're the same thing. Dot equals always, 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 always use dot equals when you are comparing strings. Never equal signs, okay? If you are comparing strings, you want to do dot equals. That includes also if you want to compare objects. So if you wanted to see, let's say, a student class is equal to another student from that object as well. That would allow you to compare literally two of them and see if everything's the same. If you do equal signs, what you're checking for is if their location is the same thing. That's a problem. You don't want to use that because that might not necessarily be correct. Dot equals checks to see is the information of those strings the correct information. So always remember, if you are looking at two strings, dot equals is the way to go. That is the end of this video. I hope that you remembered some strings information, and I hope to see you later, Sabers.